You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to take a closer look at some of the local races as we head down the stretch. Morgan Lancotti is with the Hinckley Institute of Politics, here to help us do just that. Morgan, welcome back to the show. Always great to have you on with us.
Thanks for having me.
So when you take a look at the midterms and you look at Utah, I mean, the 4th Congressional District just really sticks out, no matter how you look at it. So let's take a look at that and the national impact potentially, because we're talking a swing of power potentially in the U.S. House, and this race is right in the mix.
Really, Democrats need to pick up every single seat that they can. So they're looking at every seat that's not just a toss-up, but those that are leaning Republican and leaning Democrat. And we're seeing that the 4th District is a big focus, and we're seeing a lot of outside money coming in as well.
Let's talk more about the outside money and the nature of this race, because the PACs, I mean, you can tell when you see a commercial from a PAC. It just instantly has a negative tone to it. But even the locally produced from the campaigns, this has been a negative one. Why?
And I think that's something that took people by surprise. We were all expecting it to go negative in part because of that national influence. But it went negative quick from the candidates themselves. I think in part that is because of the vote by mail. They had to get those punches out early before those ballots were sent out and people started deciding who they wanted in office.
These are two candidates that have worked together in the past, have been friendly and friends. How does that impact the race after this?
It's so interesting. Yeah, there have been more stories about how they had dinner together and their kids played together. In politics, in the past, we've seen that people will have these bare-knuckle fights on the floor or discussing politics, but at the end of the day, they'll still be genial with each other. They'll still be collegiate. With races that get this ugly, that's a whole different ballgame, and we might see some animosity for some time.
All right, let's move on to the polls. You guys have done polls through the Hinckley Institute. What are the polls showing us as far as the very latest data on this race?
We saw that Ben McAdams picked up some ground. It is neck and neck, and that some of Mia Love's former supporters are now undecided. And one of the really interesting things with this race this year is that there are no third-party candidates. So we have 8% in the district that are undecided, and they can't go to the third party like they might have in the past. They have to choose one of these candidates, and it's a tricky thing to get to 50% in the 4th district, but one of these candidates needs to do it.
What is it about Ben McAdams that is pulling some of that support from her?
We see that people are more getting to know him, and especially we've seen in the past with his mayoral races, he is an expert at being that moderate candidate, of convincing conservative Republicans, or more likely moderate Republicans, that they can support him.
What is a key for both campaigns that you expect to see as we head into the final week?
It's that ground game. These final weeks are all about turnout and knocking on doors, and I think we will see them trying to get every last vote that they can. We are hoping that we will see a record turnout this midterm election. The data that we have from the county clerks and from the lieutenant governor's office is showing that we have an astronomical increase in voter registration compared to previous midterms, and both McAdams and Love are going to try to get every one of those new voters.
I guess you still have to do that ground game to the very end, but it's also interesting to note that with mail-in elections, a lot of people have probably already sent their vote in, and it's already, in and counted.
Right, and Salt Lake County sent out those mail-in ballots right at the beginning of the period in which they could. And that is the majority of voters in this district. And so again, that's why we saw those ads early on and why we've seen this be a very heated race from the beginning.
Okay, a very strong Republican hold in the state legislature. Do you see any chance for Democrats to gain any seats in either the state House or Senate?
We might see a couple of seats flip. Most seats in the House and the Senate are very safe for Republicans. And then of course we have some very safe Democratic seats as well in Salt Lake City. But in sort of those close suburbs to Salt Lake, talking about Draper, Murray, Holiday, there are seats that flip, in West Valley as well. And we've seen a lot of money being raised by Democratic challengers, and even the United Utah candidates have had a fundraising advantage in some of these races as well.
Yeah, it could be interesting to see how the United Utah Party impacts certain races. I know one I'm keeping my eye on is House District 32 with Suzanne Harrison.
Right.
She lost to LeVar Christensen by 5 votes.
A literal handful of votes, yes.
Just a couple of years ago. So that's one we're watching there.
And she's running again, and she never really stopped campaigning.
Right.
She's been active the last 2 years.
County races, the DA's race, District Attorney in Salt Lake County, were very interesting. An incumbent going up, an internal challenge, and it seems to be very close.
It seems to be very close. We'll see. Incumbents always have an advantage, and it looks like Democrats in some cases might have an advantage this year because some of the motivations that voters are talking about are Prop 2 and some of these other Democratic candidates. However, it doesn't look great when one of your former staffers is running against you, and then we've also seen this case be taken to the Supreme Court, talking about how the DA's office might have mishandled some sexual assault cases. But again, that case came out after ballots had been sent out, and a lot of people had already returned those.
All right, exciting times for us, and we will see how it all plays out in the coming week. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.